shirt is inside out and backwards. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Oh, I need to fix that soon, but I'm so excited to tell you about Amy Carmichael and how she learned that everyone has worth, that she has special worth for God. And so I'll fix this in a minute. But Amy went through an embarrassing time too to learn that lesson. Have you ever been embarrassed by anything? Most of us probably have. Well, one time when Amy was young, she was back in Ireland and she was walking home from church with her family, and they saw this woman who was just in rags, and she was very poor, but someone that people kind of avoided. They didn't want to be around her, and they kind of knew her in the town, and she had spilled a bag of stuff and she was down in the mud trying to pick it up. And well, Amy saw her and her heart just went out to her, and so Amy knelt down and she just started helping pick up this woman's stuff. And pretty soon she kind of looked over and there was kids over here laughing at her. And she kind of looked at the woman, because she looked at herself and realized, I am covered in mud. I am a mess. They're laughing at me. This is embarrassing. Maybe I should get up. And then she looked at the woman again and thought, God loves this woman. She has worth. She has value. Things that are eternal are worth so much more than me being laughed at. And she continued to help this woman. That was such an important thing for her to know at that point in time, that God has worth in people, that he sees the value in people. And there's an eternal perspective that Amy could see. And she was so excited to be able to share that with others in Ireland and eventually in India. So let's go back and listen to Miss Leslie again and find out where Amy was able to use the lesson of an eternal perspective and the worth of people.
So remember, Amy, she's here. She would sit with the Indian people and listen to their stories and try to know more and more about who they were, how they worshiped, and especially she was looking for those temple children. Remember, she had no idea where they came from, and it must be not something that they talked about very often, because there were only a few clues that she was beginning to hear tidbits of, and sometimes without anybody even knowing that she was listening. One time, she had heard that a father was going to give a daughter to the temple because the mother had died and he wasn't going to take care of her anymore. He just gave her them. And then there was also a family that was having trouble paying for food. So many children. We'll just give one to the temple. Isn't that sad? And then another time, there was a little girl that was very sick, and the parents were praying to the temple gods. And then they promised, we will give this child to you if you make her well. Well, she became healed, but she was given to the temple. Amy still had no idea what was happening inside. I guess she didn't ask Prina too many questions, because Prina was so happy to be in the love of Jesus, and she didn't want to think about that anymore. But she knew that they needed to be rescued. So Amy continued to find out all these clues. Well, one day she had a new opportunity to save a girl from being sold to the temple. She was able to intervene before that happened. But the father who was going to sell his daughter said, you must pay me this much money, or I will not give her to you. Well, Amy thought, I don't know if I want to pay. Is that right, God? Should I pay this money to rescue her? And after praying, she felt God say, yes, give him the money. And so she brought this young child home. And that was the beginning of another relationship with the Lord, that this young child didn't even have to go to the temple. And she was the first of many that she was able to intervene and to pay money to keep them from going to the temple. She brought this little girl home, was able to care for her. And that was a very wonderful thing. Now, this was a lot of money that she had to give. And as she prayed, she didn't know where it would come from. Well, it just so happens another missionary in the area felt burdened to send her money. It was the amount that she needed to pay. What a blessing that was, to know that she was doing exactly what God wanted her to do. Later, Amy rescued even more children. So many that the number grew to 16 children. Can you imagine? From this one little girl, Prina, to 16 children. Now, what do you think? Were the people that were supporting her as a missionary thinking, oh, she's there to tell people about Jesus, not just rescue children? But what did Amy know about children? That they were loved by God. This little girl is important to Jesus, that she needed to know the story about him. And so she knew, no matter what anybody said, she needed to do this. And as her family grew, she needed more room for them. So she prayed, and God provided Donavor. And Donavor was a special place where there was plenty of room outside the city where it was safe. And this was the refuge that all these children sought and found. And Amy was always there with open arms. And the stories of this place grew, and they spread throughout the whole area. And many people who did not know Amy, they heard about the stories and they sought her out, including Jewel. Jewel was one of the ladies that served these idols. And yet, she always was asking for forgiveness, and she felt the burden of her sin and never felt the release and the love. And yet, she had heard about Jesus. All the stories that went throughout the land of India. A lot of the times, they were coming from Amy and her family. And she was able to receive a copy of the Bible. Oh, and this is where things get exciting. She was able to read for herself the promises of Jesus, that he is the one true God, that he is the one who died on the cross for her sins, to clean her completely. And what joy. Look at Jewel's face. She is so happy to find that. And yet, she's also scared. Her family would not be happy to know that she is now following Jesus, not serving truly in her heart. And yet she feels like she has to continue to serve these idols in her house. And then one day she realizes, what I read in this Bible, I can no longer do that. I cannot pretend. And she runs away, and she's able to make it to Donavur and be with Amy and live there.
Wasn't it fun to hear how Amy could see the worth and the value in these kids? God values each one of those children that she helped. God values you, and he has a plan for you. And it's just fun to hear stories about how he uses other people to make a difference in each one of your lives, in each one of their lives. Even though there was times that it may not have been the way other people thought she should be a missionary, she was helping children, not adults, and people may have laughed at her. But she learned that the value of a person is so much more than worrying about being laughed at. Come back tomorrow and we'll hear more about Amy's story.